Hey everybody, welcome to the Going Somewhere podcast. Today's a very special episode. I've got our first returning guests to the podcast. We've got Dave Leedahl and Alyssa Teubner. How are you guys doing today?
Great. How are you, Stephen?
Oh, I'm good.
How are you, Alyssa?
Good. It's a good day to be back.
I'm excited. I'm excited for this conversation. This is going to be a little bit different. If you are an avid listener of the Going Somewhere podcast, gotta turn that off. If you're an avid listener of the Going Somewhere podcast, we usually just interview somebody and kind of talk about life as young adults. Today, we're going to answer some questions that you, the listeners, have submitted about young adulthood, especially for those in the post-college graduation mode right now. So let's get into it. Are you guys excited?
So excited.
Let's do it.
So excited. Okay. So first question that I want to ask is just, what was the most challenging thing about life after college? Dave, why don't you start?
Honestly, kind of worrying that I'm missing something, to become an adult. It's like, what were my parents doing that I wasn't seeing? Like, what are all the usernames and passwords that I should probably assume?
The practical stuff.
Yeah, practical stuff. And then student loans, getting track of where all of those lived and which ones were really bad, which ones were just kind of bad, and trying to call the 1-800 numbers and the customer service lines to kind of track kind of getting on top of current life, because college was so wild and crazy and busy for me. And I, in retrospect, probably didn't track enough of the progress along the way. And so I was really relying on post-college graduation to kind of reset where am I at in my life from like every standpoint. Is my driver's license needing to have a different address, or is the vehicle that I'm driving under my name? Is it insured? Can that be something my mom helps me with? Is that something I should assume right now? My cell phone plan, all of those things, just trying to really get objectively where I was at in my life was kind of a surprise and kind of a challenge for me.
Okay. How about you, Alyssa?
So I went right to grad school afterwards and switched states. I was in a long distance relationship then at that point. And so that was really difficult to figure out, how do I get into this new groove of what my relationship looks like while living in a new state and starting school. So I think I was just entirely overwhelmed at that process and very lonely.
I get that. Yeah. I think everybody has that shared experience of just like, what next? And like you said, there's the practical things. You were navigating some specific things, a long distance relationship. I think one thing a lot of people ask is about the student debt. And you guys don't have to give like the number, but what was that like, and was that experience daunting? I'm assuming the answer will be yes, but.
Yeah, so we were newly married. We graduated from college, Alyssa and I, on the same day, packed up everything we owned or didn't own, and then moved, 5 hours away. And so the daunting thing too was kind of combining those things as a married couple. So now it's kind of like we're looking at it together, because we believe that combining all of our resources, debt, and all those things was really important. And both of us only had student debt, so that was like helpful to kind of simplify it that way. But then now, being husband and wife, like, how do we set goals? How do we set priorities? How do we set budget together and those types of things? And so a lot of the tools that we hear about all the time with Financial Peace University and Dave Ramsey, like that helped us even more than like the philosophy of it, just the planning of it, so that we could get on top of what we were going after. But I know for sure you're married to a finance professional. So like, what was that like for you?
We dated though for like 2.5 years before we combined any finances. So I had about 2.5 years on my own before we were doing that. For me, Stephen, I was an RA, so I really hardly came out with any student debt. It was really minimal. Calvin joked on the day we got married that he had to inherit all my debt, and it was very minimal. But he was a farm kid. He worked for 75 cents an hour for years, so he had no debt. So between the two of us, it was done by the day we got married. But in graduate school, I was making a stipend. They were paying for school, but the income was almost nothing. So I wasn't stressed by the student debt. I was stressed of, when something happens to my car, how do I pay for it? Or if I want to do something fun, there was no debt, but there was no income for those 2 years, really. And I remember really wanting to go on a vacation on my second spring break. And I said, okay, I make about $1,100 a month and it's going to cost $1,000. I'm going to spend $100 this month. And I did. I ate at the dining center. I didn't pay to live because I was a hall director for grad school. And so
that's amazing.
They say you live off what you make. And at that point, it was so true. I just lived off of what I made, and it was super minimal. And I didn't really feel like I was lacking because it was just my lifestyle at that point.
I think you bring up a good point. Like when there's a will, or where there's a will, there's a way. And if you really reflect on what we really need as a young adult, you can narrow it down.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
Super minimal. I remember only spending the cash that I had. So I mean, fun money was like $20 a month, and I was like, okay, let's make it work.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And so when I graduated, I had $25,000+ of debt, but I was going into being a campus missionary. And so I was raising my budget and doing all these things. And I remember I got more questions from other people. Like, are you scared? Are you nervous? Partially, I just didn't know what was going on. But I also knew that I didn't want to have that hanging over my head either. So I would like to say I was just I just ate rice and beans and did all those things. Right. It was kind of out of mind, honestly, but I'd instilled some practical things from the get-go in finances to, one, not spend more. Early in college, I made the mistake of going on a spring break trip on a credit card.
Oh, no.
And I bought the whole group's hotel, and they were supposed to pay me back. They paid me back late, and it ended up being credit card debt.
Yep.
And so I was like, never again will I give myself a loan.
Yeah.
And so there were some foundational bedrock things that I was just kind of living on for a while. And then there's a wake-up call where I was just like, all right, I'm just going to put everything I can towards it and live as cheap as possible. And one of the questions that was asked was, what are some foundational financial principles that you would employ day one? What are some of the things you wish you would have done financially day one?
Okay, so this is ironic because I think you taught my husband this.
Oh, wow.
It all comes around.
I think you visited his small group.
Oh, wow. As long as it worked.
It did. So one of the things, I stopped by a Chi Alpha table today, and one of the things that we do that has worked so well for us is 20% of what we both make goes to a bank account that is only used for tithing. We don't see it in our account. You never move it. It never comes around. You never have to question how much. All of that runs through a Shields card. So we get tons of points for all of our tithing, which is great. If you're going to spend money, make money doing it. And then it's been really, really great to just never have to move that money around because you're never it's tight this month. Maybe we'll just leave it. It doesn't exist out of anything but that account. And that's helped us be faithful. He moves the money, and then I get to spend it when I feel God's pull. And so that's kind of how our relationship works, is he's really faithful in stewarding that tithe, and I'm really faithful at giving it away. So it works out really well.
Yeah, well, that's
1-2 punch. I like it.
Yeah, that's amazing. We encountered something similar. We were those people who, because of our student debt, kind of wondered, God, how do we tithe when we're in so much student debt? And we both grew up knowing that was so important to tithe, even though your financial situation can change. And so we were committed to that. And then we saw how really God worked alongside some heavy discipline. So we were those people who had cash in envelopes for 2 years. And when the money was not in the envelope, we were done. And so Alyssa would go to the bank and get quarters, because for coin laundry, we're living in kind of a dumpy apartment. You stayed at that apartment, and so you can attest it wasn't the nicest apartment. But
I slept in the kitchen and the living room at the same time.
Yeah, it's one of those things where when you turn around, you would knock somebody over with your elbow. It was just that kind of a place, but it was great. It was perfect for us at the time. And so we were able to say after 2 years of living there, we left Rochester debt-free, but it wasn't without the pain of budgeting and being those people, and without really the, honoring God through the tithe, where we could approach God and say, we've been obedient, and now God, help us have wisdom now to adhere to some financial principles that would really help us. And that freedom in that was so key for us, not just in our walk with the Lord, but also our marriage, our professional lives. And that was the thing about going into pharmacy was, you go from making no money and into a lot of student loans to now you're making really good money. And we realized that, tithing on $10 was great. It definitely, we noticed when we were tithing on much more than that, that's where your heart kind of gets checked again. Okay, God, I'm in this, right? Oh yeah, I am in this. And we had a pastor many years ago who said, it's a penny on every dime, right? And so how do you really navigate that? And definitely seeing God's faithfulness through that was huge for us.
That's so good. I heard this advice a while back, and it was right when you get out of college, you get a real adult paycheck for the first time. Yeah. Oftentimes you see more money in your bank account at one time than you do ever, and so I think it's so easy to get out of college and then you go, okay, I have more, so I'm going to live on more. But something somebody told me was to basically live like a college student for at least a year. like to try to repeat that same
Really good
lifestyle of live with people. If you're single, like live with roommates. It's tempting to go, okay, I'm out of college, I'm done with roommates forever. And you get a big apartment and you put a lot of money towards that, or the way that you eat, the way that you do entertainment, or the likelihood is the car will probably last at least another year, so you don't have to replace the car right away. Because I think that's something that a lot of people around you are going to be getting new cars, and they're going to be getting the fancy apartment downtown, and it's like, whoa, they're really living now. But if you live, for like that for 1 year, 2 years, it's going to set you up for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would say too, especially to the young women listening, is pay for a financial planner. Like, don't think in a couple of years I'll start saving for retirement. In a few years, yes, live cheaply if you can, but also like, where do you invest in a way where it's bringing you value rather than just spending? Where are you building equity? And I think a lot of women are afraid of that. And especially married women friends who allow their spouse to just run that show. And I would encourage like finding a financial planner that values both parties, cool. Or doing it single and really feeling like you are confident in understanding what that means, and doing that. And then also don't be afraid to spend a little money on the things that bring you joy. Like, we knew for 5 years we were committed to not having children. That was part of our plan. And so we were like, we're going to spend money on traveling. But that we did the same thing as we did with tithing. A certain percentage of each paycheck went into a vacation fund. And so if it wasn't there, we weren't going to book flights. But if it was there, we were going to go.
Yeah.
So what things bring you joy, and put money to that, and then thinking about how to build value.
I think that's so cool, because when you do that, you can be confident in that trip. You don't have to be like, well, did we have enough, or did we not, or did we overextend? It's like, no, you guys had planned that out. And like, what a cool way to live, where you can be confident, just have fun and not worry about, well, were we ready to make this trip a reality?
Did we spend it all on the one vacation? Exactly.
Right. Well, and I think just the advice of getting a financial planner, I think you'll probably have a dozen friends call you because they're now trying to build their clientele. But get one that you trust, or find somebody that your parents recommend, or somebody like Pastor Brad recommends, and sit down with them early to let them help you map all that out. Because I think that's the daunting thing. And I think that's part of our story, is just like delaying things because it was intimidating to address it.
Absolutely.
We were really good about getting out of debt. And we also similarly were like, the next time we'll be able to travel, just the two of us, without any strings attached, is when we're in our 50s. And so what are the things that we would enjoy doing in our 20s together that we just won't have this opportunity, at least very frequently, for a long time? So I think that's really good advice and fun advice too. It's just solid all across the board. What are some of the fears and roadblocks many young adults feel post-college? So this is just kind of more of a setup question. I think you guys have been around young adults as a pastor. You were in pharmacy, worked with college ministry. Obviously, you work on the college campus and love pouring into seniors as they're leaving. But what are some of the fears and roadblocks, and how would you address those?
All right, I got one. So I remember for myself, but I also see this in a lot of my college students, of feeling like God's got one right thing for me and I better not make the wrong decision. And I have to give credit. Jen Anderson, I remember talking to her when I was graduating grad school, and she said, did you pray that God would close any doors that aren't right and pray really big that he would open doors? And he said, yeah. And she said, do you have some options out there? And he said, yeah. And that's what I'm confused about. Like, which one? And she just said, God is so faithful. Every single one of those doors is ordained and is going to be kingdom work. And how cool that Jesus loves you enough to like let you choose. And I think stepping confidently into your choice, as long as you've done the prayer and the discernment, like God's not like trying to trick you and be like, there's one thing for you. And if you don't figure it out, you have no purpose. Like, he's going to open lots of doors, and you can do work in any of them. You just gotta trust in that and know there's not a wrong choice.
That's good.
Yeah, that's so good. I don't have much to add to that, other than I think we all fear wrong decisions that put us on a bad trajectory, even if it's not sin versus not sin. It's like, well, this job versus that job, taking that opportunity. I think especially nowadays, young adults have so many opportunities for their work that could be so much more dynamic than maybe when I came out, as far as the whole work from home thing. And, do I move? Do I not move? Do I stay put? There's just so much more access. I feel like rather than that beaten path, there's so many other ways to do it. Added degrees you can add on to your current degree. Do you pursue a second degree and go into the workplace at the same time? How does ministry look along with that? So I think rather than, like you said, Alyssa, focusing on is it right or wrong. It's just, hey, I'll make adjustments along the way. And just because I do something for 5 to 7 years doesn't mean I have to do it for 50 to 60.
Yeah.
And yet carrying the wisdom of not wanting to jump ship just when things get a little bit more difficult. And the other thing that I think a roadblock for a lot of young adults is, and this was me too, is how do I integrate into maybe a workplace that these people have worked together for a long time? And now I'm the new kid on the block. So how do I respect and honor their longevity, but not kind of be like off in the corner, not engaged in my workplace is another challenge I think I face and a lot of people face.
For sure. I think too, it's the integration of friendship too. I think sometimes that's even a roadblock or a fear that people don't even realize that they're going to have, because especially if you come out of a rich friendship in high school or college where you have lots of connections, lots of community, and then you move somewhere else or you enter into that 9 to 5 workflow where it's like you get caught off guard of, oh, I can't just like go and get coffee at 10 a.m. and, hang out until 2 a.m., so I think that's something too. And I think there's so many things that we can speak to of just how that's been answered in our life and what things that we've done or things that people have taught us too. So that's something that I kind of want to jump into, is just kind of community and friendships. This is where a lot of the questions came from. One of the questions was, how do I get plugged into community post-college? And then I'll kind of ask a follow-up with that. How do I meet people around the same age after moving to a new town post-college? So those were a couple of the questions.
I feel like this is where we all should just circle up and just sit at Alyssa's feet and let her teach us.
I mean, I remember working at St. Ben's, right? And Cal and I were young, newly married. And like half the town was nuns, who are amazing women, by the way.
Yes.
But they're most 80s and 90s, and then college students. And that was not where we were at anymore. And feeling really, really lonely. And I would say, like, it's okay to sit in loneliness. Like, that's not a bad thing to realize you have to start over and feeling like, well, why isn't this coming right away? Like, it takes work.
Yeah.
And so just encouraging, like, if you're in that season of loneliness, I would say it probably took a year each move to get to a place where I was like, okay, this is my community, this is my place. And so like you talked about in the job, not just jumping ship when it gets hard, I would say the same thing in community. Like give it a year at least before you get critical.
That's good.
Yeah, totally. Definitely being new to Rochester for Alyssa and I, we'd have those nights where we would like go to bed and we'd actually both be pretty sad and be like, you're my only friend. Or, you're my only friend. And we it was like we were discouraged and yet encouraged. It was kind of that dichotomy in our own hearts. We checked out several churches. We, really found out that you need to go to a church more than once to really know about the life of the church. Because we would find out that, just because there's an emphasis going on in a certain week, and this is just full transparency. There was a church we visited, it ended up being an amazing church, but the first day we visited, there was a huge emphasis on like post-abortion care for women. And the whole service was dedicated to that. And not getting into too many details, it just seemed like, wow, that's pretty heavy for like a first experience at a church, right? Well, we got to know the pastor, we got to know the heart of the church, and there was so much going on that was so great. I think if we would have just taken that and like we were both like deer in the headlights, like, whoa, that's like a heavy topic for like a new churchgoer to a community, we would have missed out. We would have missed out on that. And then we ended up connecting with some really great friends who many we know to this day. And I think one thing that really stands out to me is there was a gentleman that I worked with in the pharmacy named Phil Vo. He's still a good friend to this day, but he was like that one person in the workplace that was like, hey, Dave, can I take you to my favorite he was Vietnamese, and he invited me out to eat and then invited Alyssa and I over to his family's house. And their family, it was like everybody living in the same house. So like his brother and wife and parents. And then we were there. There were maybe 50 people that all lived in this home. And we got to kind of be part of their like Vietnamese family for like 2 or 3 nights per week, some weeks. And it was such a blessing, and it really challenged me, like, wow, am I functioning that way? Like in Fargo, North Dakota, where somebody just new to the community but doesn't have like a family to be a part of, they were the first people to like, hey, come be part of our family. And so Alyssa and I both agree, like Phil Vo, like what a great guy, just to this day.
I feel like too, it's coming to the point of awareness of our need for a community. Because I think, like you said, Alyssa, I think that was really good. It's okay to sit in the loneliness. I think it tells us a lot about our needs. It tells us a lot about us, but also to then recognize that longing and then pursue that. And I think too, it's just like start with one person, finding that one person that you can plug into, and you never know what that can lead to. But also I think too, it's just kind of redefining and reshaping, because sometimes it's like, okay, I need 18 people that are my age because that's what I used to have.
Right.
But it might look different. You might be in an environment where my primary community is going to be of a different age demographic. And that might be like a shock, of like, wait, what? But I think it's also so important for us to come to the grips with that and go, okay, this is community. This is what it's going to look like for this season. I'm going to lean into what that is too.
I think sometimes it's like I challenge my college kids all the time, like, who is someone you wish you were better friends with?
Cool.
And have them make lists, and then I'm like, have you told them? I remember when I was in St. Joe, I worked out at this gym every day, and there was this girl who always was at the weightlifting station right next to me. I was like, oh, I think she's really cool. I really wish she was my friend. And I remember sitting, very bizarre, but in the sauna, and I looked at her and I was like, I think you're really cool, and I'd really like to be your friend. And she looked at me, she's like, no way, I've been wanting to be your friend for so long.
Wow, cool.
And so I think sometimes reinforcing, like, hey, I love that you do that at work. That's so cool. Like, do you want to get coffee? I think we're afraid to flatter people because we're afraid of rejection. Right. But nobody's going to be like, oh, I'm not really that great. I'm not really that cool. You don't want to be my friend. They're like, oh my gosh, like, you noticed me.
Right.
And really ask them, like, will you do this with me? Or I noticed this in you. Because then all of a sudden people are more committed to building that friendship. But it takes guts. Like, there's a fear of like vulnerability there. But I've never seen it go badly.
Right. And worst case scenario, you leave that situation or that and go, okay, there wasn't a ton in common. I will try again, but that's okay too. Like, not everybody has to become your best friend. And one of the questions was, how do you build community in a town with no one your age? So this might not be something you and I can speak directly to. You might have a better chance, judging by what you just said. But what is some advice you would give to that person?
I mean, intergenerational friendships are like really powerful things. Yeah. I think there was a woman when I was in Sartell who she needed help cleaning her house because she had arthritis. And so we would spend hours a week just hanging out. And I walked away being like, oh, that's my friend. Like, I didn't feel like I was like helping her wash her windows. But also I would question, like, is there really nobody your age, or are you really just missing the college population where everyone was your age? Because I have a hard time believing there's no one your age. And also just that gentle reminder of there's age difference isn't as much of a thing when y'all graduate. Like, you might feel now like, oh my gosh, somebody's 30. And one of y'all called me middle-aged at church a few weeks ago, and it hurt. But there's not that much of a difference where it feels like in college there is. And so I would just say, really question, like, is there no one your age, or are you just like missing that college community?
Yeah, I think that's so good, Alyssa, because in young adulthood, phases of life are so so close together. And so I think people believe, well, because you're at a different stage, like you're married, I'm not, or you have kids and I don't, or you have like a leadership position within your job and I'm kind of in an entry level job, that must make us like super different now. Like, just because a day lapsed, that all of a sudden things are different. No, we kind of all have the same hopes, fears, a lot of the same preferences, a lot of the same things that we enjoy doing, and just like not believing the lie that, well, because you're at this slightly different step that you don't want to talk to me, I don't want to talk to you. And then from the intergenerational thing, like the workplace is such a great place to celebrate longevity and to respect like folks who've been doing what we've been doing for so long. And introducing ourselves is such a powerful thing too, rather than, well, assuming because you've been here for 30 years and I've been here 3 weeks that you don't want to talk to me and I shouldn't want to talk to you. No, let's be friends, and I want to learn from you. And I feel like I've developed the best friendships intergenerationally in my life when I've been seeking mentorship and seeking how to do things better in the workplace. And all of a sudden, now that I've appealed to your expertise and your experience, now a friendship can form out of that.
I think too, when you live in maybe a rural area, there's different challenges there, obviously. But I think, we actually got to live in we were 30 minutes from Philadelphia, but we were in a small town community,
it was small.
A couple thousand people. And it was fun to get to know neighbors. Like, we got to know our next door neighbors who, the painters, they're incredible people. They're, like my parents' age, they have kids that are my age, and we really bonded with them. They would help us with the kids. They would have us over for dinner. Like, it was just doing life with them. And then I was playing at the park one day. Great place to meet people your age. If there's a park in your community or whatever, if you don't have kids, you don't want to go to play at that park. That might be viewed differently. But, we met somebody again, she was my age, and then she told me about her son who was in the bike club. And even though I didn't join the bike club, I didn't even own a bike, but you had a place. On the monkey bars because you were there playing or something. I had a place I could plug into, and I think it's just getting to know the people that are in proximity, regardless of, all right, I need to find a 26-year-old in my proximity. But you never know what'll happen or who you'll meet or how that will connect you to somebody else too.
And when you move away, you realize who your faithful friends are.
Isn't that the truth?
And I would encourage you to be the faithful friend.
Yeah.
Like, be the friend that sends a letter or calls. And the friends who are willing to drive 11 hours to Iowa, like, those have become some of my dearest friends because I saw this commitment to pursuing friendship. And so you might not be in that city for the rest of your life. It might be a 3-year stint, but be a faithful friend when your friends move away. They need that.
For sure. That's so good. And one of the questions too is, how do you go about continuing your friendships post-college with your best friends who do not live in the same city as you?
Am I the only person that struggles with that?
No, not at all.
That was hard. I was surprised the friendships that got way stronger after we moved away that I would have never suspected would have gotten really strong. And I was shocked at the relationships that kind of faded, not in a hurtful way, but just kind of, they faded.
Yes.
And I to this day still kind of scratch my head of how that all worked out. But what was it like for you guys?
For me, that was something that I had been not only a student for 4 years, and I was on staff for 6 years with Chi Alpha. And so I had like 10 years of super strong college friendships. So if anything, I went away trying to maintain and strengthen too many friendships. And then, like you said, there was that surprise of like, this person really like took intentionality, and I would call them, they would call me. And I think just leaning into that too, leaning into those people that, of course, you have got. I'm a nerd, and I made a spreadsheet, so I would not let people drop through the cracks altogether.
Man, that is amazing.
I could pull it up right now, but I had a spreadsheet, and I like had a column where it was just like last connection, and I would write in text or email. I was actually like a drop down menu because
you had to select from the drop down.
Yeah, it was like text or call, or I started writing letters to people because I just felt like that was a more meaningful connection than just a text message. And so for me, it was just highly important. And then also I was learning a lot too about friendship and learning, one, to be unoffendable. I think out of sight, out of mind is just a part of life. Like it's harder to maintain friendships. So I think early on I felt hurt sometimes, like they don't call me or they never text me. They're living their life as was. And just because they don't see me, it's hard. It's just challenging, and giving people grace in that. But yeah, it's a challenge, recognizing it's a challenge, and then just working hard to like find the few. That's probably been the big thing too, is coming back from New Jersey, coming back to like the, abundance of people that I could connect with. I really wanted to come back knowing like who the 3, 4, 5 people that we were really going to invest in.
Right.
Because that's what I did not have before.
I think for us, what's so different from the college kids now is we weren't as integrated into social media. Like, I love y'all, but you won't pick up the phone and call. Like, it takes some of those old school ways of writing letters and cards and calling. But I think, Dave, what you said really resonated, of almost grieving some of those friendships. And I think that's okay to do. But then also just being like, God, like totally surprised me. Like, who is in this place? And it was for me a hard balance of like, how do I integrate into this life and not just like wish that I was fast forwarding through this season? Because I knew I wasn't going to be in Iowa forever. We knew we weren't going to be in St. Joe forever. How were we intentional about building friendships there, while also like not letting go of what we had here? And I always felt like I was in 2 places at once. And I cried over that a lot, of like, my heart is in 2 places and I feel like I have 2 different lives and that I don't do well in either one. Like, that was a huge struggle when we weren't here, because I wanted to be here at some point.
Yeah, and I think for me, another challenge was I did walk through like feeling like a bad friend syndrome, for sure. I just think when I got out of school, and, newly married. And then in the residency, you kind of feel like you have to live at a hospital for a couple of years. So then you don't feel like a good friend. And then when we came back to Fargo, and now you're kind of in that day-to-day trying to acclimate to a new job, a new pace. I feel like that was really time-consuming too. So there's some nights I just came home and like exhausted, and I felt like being a good friend took a lot of time and energy, which I also think refined friendships for me a little bit more, because now it wasn't about how many times I was able to work through a spreadsheet. Like I would have loved to have done that. I should have done that. I wish. See, why wasn't this podcast for me, Stephen? Why?
I'll do a tutorial. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. We got to go somehow go back in time and like download this into my brain. But a system would have helped me. But it really helped, I think, help refine. How could I be creative in being a good friend with like space in my life where it was available, knowing that even though it's an unconventional time for most people to meet, maybe it's the perfect time for somebody to meet up. And they're like, oh yeah, 6 a.m. Sure, absolutely. Rather than like, really, you can't hang out with me on Tuesday night. It's like, I'm sorry, I can't. And so a lot of friendships that I had in young adulthood were very unconventional times and ways to meet. And I think that just being comfortable with that was really helpful, versus in college where I felt like the afternoons were good, evenings were good. Sometimes it's like, hey, 5 a.m., 6 a.m., let's do it.
Yeah. I think with everything, it's an expectations thing too, of like, I wouldn't call people because I'm like, what I want is 45 minutes, like full on catch up.
Yeah.
But Pastor Brad Lewis was just incredible about, I think he just knew, he was like tracking me, but he would call me on my drive to work, and it was a 10-minute drive. Yep. And just that 10 minutes was so life-giving, and in that, and just then taking the intentionality to do that. Like, I could listen to a podcast or a book, which I love to do when I'm driving, but I can also catch up with somebody for just a short time. We're not going to change the world together in this 10 minutes, but it could change my world for the day. Right. And just making those adjustments of like, what I used to have with this person might just not be an option right now, but I can maintain and build and just find new ways. And I think when you find those new ways, it also produces like a deeper level of friendship, with somebody. Like when you find a new creative way to connect, whether that's, we had a group of people that we played like Quiplash. It's an online, and we started doing that, and we just would laugh together, and it wasn't in the same room. We were sitting alone in our living room. If our neighbors looked through the window, we're weirdos, but it was just those things that made us stronger with those people too. Because I think the effort that they put in to like, all right, I'll turn on my computer and I'll turn one computer towards the screen so you can see what we're doing. Like just feeling invited and included in that was huge for us.
Pre-planning is huge.
Yeah.
Have those conversations before you're in the stress of moving and transition and isolation of like, when are we going to see each other? What is this going to look like?
Yeah.
And just, especially with those friendships that you like or don't want to lose.
For sure.
Have those conversations.
Well, it just takes intentionality. And, one of the questions too, kind of on a side note, was how do I make time for others while adjusting to a full-time job on top of other things? Because I think that's one of the big roadblocks for relationships, because you have to really fight for it. But what would you say? How do I make time for others while adjusting to full-time job on top of other things?
I feel like I kind of already tried to answer that with I don't know if I have any more wisdom on that.
Adults are more scheduled humans than college. And so sometimes I think it's just scheduling it. Like, yes, I have my small group every Monday, but that's also just a really great excuse to know I'm going to get to catch up with my gal pals. Like, versus if we just left it to when we would see each other, I don't know, because things get busy or, and so I would just say for people who are graduating to figure out those times that work for you and then scheduling it. It might not be natural at first, but to be like, oh yeah, the first Tuesday of every month we grab coffee. Like that's just how we meet up.
Right.
I think in the workplace too, biblically, I wish, only in heaven will we find some of this out. But when all of these disciples are fishermen, what was friendship like for them? Was it always heavy ministry? Probably not. There's probably a lot of shoulder to shoulder time. And like Paul and Priscilla and Aquila, which is another cool dynamic of friendship. Paul is a single person, Priscilla and Aquila are a married couple, and they're friends. But all we know is that they made tents together. So we don't know how much just life and conversation happen in that scenario. So for me, this translated to, hey, if I get a lunch break at work, rather than like diving into my phone, which can kind of be a good kind of mental break, is there something where I can actually hang out with somebody else that I'm a friend with at work and just be friends, knowing that someone might reject me, but I don't know what's going on in their life. And I think just to be frank, I think sometimes rejection in the workplace for friendship is more just like a defense mechanism. Mm-hmm. And I would suspect that many people who are like, no, I'm going to do my own thing for lunch, they might be going back to like their home that night and be like, I should have gotten lunch with so-and-so. Like that wouldn't have been so bad. But in the moment, it's almost like, why would we do that? It's too comfortable to kind of keep doing what we've always been doing. So I think sometimes just taking that extra step in the workplace is so helpful too. The precious friendships I have today from people that I've worked with were from conversations shoulder to shoulder when things are like late at night in the pharmacy and it's just you and another person. You can just talk about real life or, you know, grab something from the cafeteria together.
I'm giggling because when I was back at NDSU, you'd think, okay, college, there's got to be great community of people that work together, and I wasn't feeling that.
Yeah.
The president has what's called the president's cabinet. It's like the big people on campus. So I started putting meetings on people's calendar called the president's cabinet because they'd get all nervous, like, what is this? What am I invited to? So like on Friday, I have a meeting called the president's cabinet, and I invited 75 people at work to go to bingo. And people now request it. They're like, are we having a cabinet meeting soon?
Meeting.
But, you know, like, how can, seriously.
That's
The
amazing.
only person who doesn't come is the president? Is that fair to say?
When he retires, I guess I could invite him. But, you know, to really take those risks and, like, be like, what would it be like if I just invited 75 coworkers to go to bingo on a Friday night to celebrate the end of the year that we did a great job? What would it be like to invite 20 people to go to B-dubs, and if 7 show up, that's amazing.
Right.
Yeah. That's so good. And I think, too, when you come out of maybe a season where friendships, again, college, it's just so natural to build friendships. You're with them for significant times. And when you're part of a college ministry, like the three of us were too, it's like a whole nother part of that. And so I think when you're making friendships, there's just basic things that I think we forget how to do, or we don't realize how to do them. Just like
did it for us.
Yeah, like finding things that we can agree on. Like the 1% principle is a John Maxwell thing, but it's like find the 1% of things that you can agree on, and then focus 100% of your energy on that one thing.
Yeah,
So you might work with people that are vastly different than you, but then you might discover a TV show that you both watch, or a restaurant that you enjoy, or whatever the case is. And then focus on that. Start there and build on that little tiny foundation of Applebee's, which I don't think there's many people like, Applebee's is my jam. Like, this is my one restaurant. But to build on that and to overlook things that maybe you would have was a non-negotiable in friendship because you had the pick of the litter in a sense, like, and just find people that you can just find that 1%, and just give it all to it. I think is really a fun thing about friendships, regardless of workplace, neighborhood, anywhere, church.
Neighbors and coworkers. I feel like so 2 things jump out at me. One was there's a great guy that was working in the same department as me, and I found out that he is really into his lawn, and of course my lawn was embarrassing, and so every time we would hang, it'd be like, tell me about lawn care, like tell me about like how do you do it? And he would be like, you got to oversee it every winter, blah blah blah. And then the other this lady who had been in our department for many years, her son played football for South High here in town, so every time we talked, it was like, how's so-and-so? How's football going? You know, how are the games going? Because I didn't know. And so it was, you can kind of find that one thing to develop a relationship, the 1%. And it doesn't have to be something super deep. It can start as something as simple as like lawn care or your son's football career.
And there's a great comm scholar out of Kansas, and I'm taking Stephen and I back to our comm days here.
Yeah, come on.
It takes
bring on the comm scholar.
40 hours to move from acquaintance to friend, and 500 hours to move from friend to good friend.
Wow,
and so that's when you're like, okay, but like I don't feel close to anyone. You're not even close to your 500 hours. Like that takes a long time.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think sometimes we're like, I'll never have friends like I did in Chi Alpha, in college, whatever. But you literally haven't even been graduated enough to have that much time.
Wow.
That's
really
good.
Insightful.
Yeah. One of the questions, it wasn't really a question, it was a statement, and I had to bring it up. I thought it was so good. I think people can resonate, but it said, I'm scared to jump into a normal adult life because of how mundane it seems. No question. That was it. But
mundane it seems?
What are your thoughts on that? The monotony of what appears to be adult life, and it does present like I don't know if I want to grow up. Like, it looks boring. It looks sad. So what are your guys' thoughts on that question? I think a lot of people are wondering.
Alyssa has the best answer here, so I'm going to go first so that she can just like serve it up. And then she can
I
go
don't
like,
know if I do. I mean, when I read these questions, I laughed at that because I was sad that we are perceived so boring. But
Yeah, come on.
I mean, I would say it's more about setting no boundaries than having not enough to do. I mean,
yeah,
I could fill every moment of every day, but
Yes.
should I? And is
Right.
that good for me? Is that healthy for me? I'm not bored. I would love more rest in my life,
yeah.
to be very, very honest. I sat down with a college student that goes here yesterday, and she said, yeah, we were talking about how much you travel, and is that just because you don't have kids yet and you feel like you can? And I'm like, partly, but that's just something we love to do. Your life will have room for what you love to do
right.
if you prioritize it. And I always kind of talk about, don't build your dream job, build your dream life. So for us, that's traveling, and that's going to Need to Breathe 6 times in concert. And we can have those things and then go to work the next day. Like, it's not like a one or the other.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. I think the whole mundane life is just something that, well, I think two things. One thing is it presents an opportunity to build more of a foundation. I think the longer you get into life, I'm sure you guys have seen this, life gets more compressed. So if you've ever wanted to get like an advanced certification for your job, or you wanted to take on a leadership program, I think now is the time to do that if you're a newly graduating young adult.
Yes.
Because if you wait 10 years, you're going to be like, oh, I don't remember what I used to remember. And so that was really good advice that I got, is whatever you wanted to do. And in pharmacy world, there were a lot of advanced certifications. And in ministry, there's a lot of advanced things you can do to grow. And being young, right out of college, and full of the Lord with Chi Alpha, full of pharmacy from college, you can kind of keep that learning going rather than shutting off the brain and being like, oh, good, I can take a break. And the unfortunate part, and I think you highlighted this at a recent event that you spoke at, Stephen, where beware of the break becoming a lifestyle. Knowing that you're not going to be able to like go back and redo that. And then 2, that trip that you've always wanted to do. For me and Alyssa, it was like, well, what have we always kind of like wanted to do, but we never felt we had time to do, or we had space to do. And so we're those crazy people where we had like a free like Friday through Sunday. And so we skied Colorado one day. We flew in Friday night. We flew out Sunday afternoon, and we were those crazy people. And it's so funny. We still reference that trip to this day because it was the one time we did it. We may never do it again.
And the mundane is really fun when you get old. Like,
True.
we will drive around the
True.
neighborhood and be like, oh, dang, those shutters are really nice shutters. Or like, oh, that vacuum is it's on sale at Costco, and it's beautiful. But you get a kick out of it because, you buy a house and you start to, it's yours. You're not renting this place. You're taking care of something that's yours, or your dog is the cutest dog ever.
Yes.
There can't be another cuter dog than that. And I think as you slow down in a good way, the things that never would have brought you joy at 18, 22, 23, you're like, this is awesome. Like, I love this season of life.
Well, in a church this past Sunday, we talked about Sabbath and how important that is, and something that I did not adhere to as a young adult at all, because I thought, I'm young, I've got all this time, let's go, and then realize in hindsight, I think I could have had a lot more fulfillment in the mundane if I would have taken that Sabbath time to really like get my wits back about me, get off of technology, find my creative side again, more on an interval basis rather than waiting for like, okay, this has been such a mundane, terrible, busy time. So I suppose like now is the time to go on a ski trip or on a vacation or something else that's life-giving. And for us, it wasn't Need to Breathe, but Alyssa and I would like find where Hillsong was, doing a worship night, and we would like go across the country or drive across the country to go to that. And those are things where that's a whole lot more life-giving if you're not looking to that to solve like a rotted part of your heart, but rather to bounce off of a healthy lifestyle that's already in place.
100%.
I think for the individual too, I would write out what they think is mundane. I think just to take inventory of like what, observe that fear and go, okay, what is it that I'm afraid of? Like, what is this mundane monotony that I'm so intimidated by? Is it the 9 to 5, like the fixed hours of work? Is it, having the same house for a long period of time? Like, I see it as like, okay, there's a lot of spontaneity that might be removed in this new season of life. And that's true. But what is it? And then actually address those things individually. Because one, like if you look at a 9-to-5 job, if you go into it saying, all right, I'm just paying the bills. If the end of your job is to pay your bills and set you up to retire someday, even if it's a fun job, even if it's like a good job, like you're going to be set up to fail. It's going to be mundane because things that you repeat become mundane. It's just how do you define it? But if you go into work every day going, all right, I want to have a new conversation with a friend or a coworker that I've never really talked to, or I'm going to go into work today and try to find one way to bless my boss that doesn't look like, I'm sticking, whatever, but that I can just bless them and be a blessing to them, even if they don't know who it is. And then that whole day you're thinking about that. You're looking into that. I just think there's so many ways to take the things that are mundane and not leave them and run away as fast as you can from mundane, but lean into it. I've read this one thing, 80% of our life is spent doing mundane things, brushing our teeth, doing laundry, folding laundry, cooking meals, eating meals. Why would we wish away the 80% of our life instead of just leaning into it and maximizing it, making the most of it? And I think part of that too is thinking about the big picture of our life. Like, is there one place we're trying to get retirement or whatever where life will truly be lived? Or, are we just going to live life to the fullest every single day, making the most of every opportunity?
Right. And since the Bible is so into discipleship, right? Like we're all trying to become like Jesus. I think one thing that made my life way less mundane is when I would just take opportunities even as the new person. Because the second you get out of you get out of your college or, pre-career life, you start this job, you're immediately an expert, right? Nobody's double checking your work. I mean, unless you're like an architect or an engineer and you have that period of time, and I get that. But when you're in your job, you're really an expert now. Mm-hmm. And then there are students, interns, trainees, new people who need orientation for the job. And so taking the opportunity to be like, who wants to take so-and-so for the day? Raising your hand being like, me, can immediately cause like conversation that you wouldn't have had, a new wrinkle in your day that you didn't expect, and make it less mundane. And you never know how God could use that friendship or the conversations that you have. So to take away mundane, I think like raising your hand and being like the trainer in whatever workplace you're in to take on learners, keeps life fresh in multiple ways, not just your career.
I wish I would have seized the mundane more. Because now I'm back in school again. And
Dr. Alyssa, though.
Not yet.
Well,
Doctor.
But I remember at finals of my master's degree when I was literally probably bawling as I was doing this, to be very honest. Like writing a list of the things I wish I could do. And it was like read for fun, cook a new recipe every single week. And I made this like bucket list of things I was going to do. And then I took the 4-year gap. I never had plans to go back to school. And here I am. Mm-hmm. But I found that list the other day and it literally felt like just a slap in the face. Like I didn't do any of these things. Like I got done and then I just got busy and I didn't do any of those mundane things that I so craved when things were too busy. And so I would challenge you to be like, what are those things that as a college student, you just like had no space.
Right.
And that you want to do because you don't know if you're going to have children, if you're going to get married, if you're going to buy a house. And suddenly a lot of that time gets filled up. So do those mundane. I would love more than anything to just read a book for fun right now. Yeah. But that's like not my season of life.
Right.
And so seize them. They're so good. Don't
good.
do what I did. Don't just like make the list, cry, graduate, and move on.
Yeah. Well, to add to that too, people produce spontaneity. Like if you want spontaneity in your life, just have people in your life because people come from all walks in life. And so if you just lean into relationships, you're going to find great ways to spice up your life. I just think that's one of the things that we can maybe fear of the mundane is like, I go to work from 9 to 5, I come home, I eat dinner, and I do it all again. I've heard that so many times before. But like when you invite people into that and you allow those relationships to become a part of that normal life, it's never the same. It's always a challenge. It's always different, which I think is really, really life-giving.
Yeah. And I think so. Like, for instance, I look at like your life, Alyssa, and sometimes it can be intimidating because I'm like, I don't know if I could put together like 75 people for a president's cabinet. But like we can all like on the way into work be like, I'm driving through Starbucks. What do you want? For like that one or two other people. And so whether you can do that large scale or small scale, I think it's like finding in the mundane, is there something that I can do to kind of spice up my day and be relational at the same time? I think is really powerful. And then as we all are on this journey towards like Alyssa Teubner,
No, we do not need that many candidates.
Where you're doing a doctorate and you're, doing your president's cabinet thing. I think that the take-home message is we can all do something to address the mundane. That's such a good question, and I'm so proud that somebody was like, how do I address this? Because it is a struggle, and it's fun, yet it's a caution, and it's that dichotomy, that's like that tension. I think that is where we're all kind of living in.
For sure. I know we could go through many more questions, and I think this is something that we'll do again on the podcast, but is there anything in conclusion that you guys want to leave with those listening today?
I'm going to let Dave go first because he's just got the best answer ever.
No, I don't. I'm actually curious to hear what the two of you think. I think just really embracing the fact that all the friends and people that you work with are in a different spot. And then there's going to be these times where you go home and you're like, it's almost like things were going so fast. And it's like maybe when you wake up from like a deep sleep and you're just thinking like, what should I do next? Am I in the sweet spot in my life? I worked so hard to get this degree or whatever. And it almost can kind of be a little anticlimactic. Like I thought, boom, there's going to be like an explosion and it was going to be so crazy. And maybe that's not everybody's experience, but from my experience, I had those days where I was like, wow, like, so this is it? Like, kind of like this is the end of the road. And I think just knowing that there are going to be days like that. Mm-hmm. And then as you get through, you're like, okay, this is a good rhythm. Like, this is fun. This is cool. But just knowing that there are going to be those days of young adulthood that are going to seem like, oh man, did I miss it? Did I do something wrong? Did I not maximize this opportunity? Or is this just how it's going to be? And I think just encouraging each other is so big of just, hey, no, you're in the right spot. And even if you don't feel like you're in the right spot, there are things you can be working towards and doing to be in the sweet spot in your life. I think like no other era of life, and I'm 35, so I'm not like in my 70s, but I just think no other time than those first few weeks and months after graduation that I felt bewildered. And I think that's okay.
That's good.
I think I'm actually going to have to give a shout out to Calvin. So Calvin is my husband. He's a great guy. He said he will not come on the podcast. We're still trying. But I really grieved college. I was a huge Bison fan. I loved my experiences. It was really hard. And to go to another university just felt like I was like a traitor. Like I just couldn't, I just could never love another school. And I did love other places. But Calvin, I remember always used to say like, these are the good old days and every day is the good old days. Like I think you can get in such a dangerous place when you look and say, no experience in my life will ever compare to college. I will never have those friends. I will never have that life. You get the privilege of another day. And so it's the best days. Like this is the best day God has given you because it's today and you get to live it. And he just always brings me back to that reality. I'm much more emotional and he's much more like, why are we so worked up? Like, this is great. This is a great season. And so just really pouring into the season that you have, give yourself a moment to grieve, but then you got to move on and you got to be really excited for what comes next.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. Thank you, Alyssa and Cal.
And Cal.
Yeah. Psalm 118:24 is, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And I just think that's like the one verse that I try to repeat every morning when I get out of bed. It's like, this is the day. He made it. I'm going to rejoice and be glad in it. And there's just something that can shift in my heart when I go into whatever is on the calendar for that day, big, small, same as yesterday, whatever. I realize that this is the one day that God made, or for today. Like this is it. This is all I have for today. And so just taking advantage of that and living into that. And also, one thing, you mentioned it, but it's so tempting, I think, when you graduate college to take a break and to kind of and I think it's important to find a new rhythm. I think it's replacing unhealthy rhythms with healthy rhythms, but acknowledge that no rhythm that you're setting intentionally is still a rhythm. And I think what ends up happening is the unintentional rhythms that we fall into in kind of like our break period become rhythms of going home after work and just binge watching Netflix and eating fast food and doing these things. And all those habits are forming us as people, but also are very hard to unform, even though we think that it's just kind of a hiatus from like a busy life. But I think that's one of the things that I see a lot of mistakes that people can make, and we've probably done it too, is just kind of going, all right, I just need to back off, put my foot on the brake for a while, and just kind of let life happen, get my feet underneath me. The feet that come underneath you are the wrong feet, though, and they lead you in a very bad direction sometimes. And at the end of the day, like, following Jesus is the greatest adventure of life. And when we just choose to follow him and live on mission for him, life can't be boring. It's always exciting, because even though it might not be like cannons going off, like, but
hoopla,
because you're being obedient to him, following him, even in the bad seasons, you can find joy in him, which is a beautiful thing.
And what you hit on, Stephen, is it's how I'm thinking about my life. Like what's going on up here? Because, I mean, that's why we need God's help to think about our lives the way he thinks about them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think any of us in this table, around this table, don't think we're not young adults. When Stephen was like, do you want to talk about young adults? I'm like, oh, great, because I am one. Like, every season, you still feel like, I got a lot to learn. Like, I don't think I'm an adult yet. I don't know when that will come, but maybe.
Mm-hmm. Right. I saw a young adult ministry. It was 18 to 24. I'm like, whoa,
That was middle-aged. That was quick.
No, thanks you guys for coming on. I just appreciate both of you and just what you've added to my life. And I know those that are listening appreciate you guys too. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
And for you listening, thanks so much for listening. We'll be back with another normal episode next week, but we just appreciate you. Make sure you keep following along. More episodes to come. Have a great day. We love you.
Bye, Mom.